Hi, everyone. Welcome back to First Principles. Today we've got Kim with us and we'll be talking about elevator pitches. How are you doing, Kim?
Fine, great to be here, Saga.
Great to meet you. So, Kim, can you introduce yourself a bit for our audiences, just for the context of this episode?
Yes, so my name is Kim Hemsley. I'm a communications coach, which means I help people with their public speaking, whether that's executives all the way down to interns. I help them speak well, not just physically, but also really get their messaging tight, really get them connecting with their audiences, and help people become comfortable on stage and, if possible, really enjoy speaking in public because whether you want to or not, most people have to do some kind of communication
Hmm.
in public at some point because of their jobs.
Right. So let's dive right in. I mean, I would like to speak about public speaking, but in the context, larger shell, let's say, of elevator pitches. So,
Yes.
excuse me, what is an elevator pitch?
Well, an elevator pitch is a way of introducing yourself or an idea or even a product in a very quick, succinct way.
Hmm.
And what you're doing to the person listening is getting them interested. You're trying to capture their interest very quickly to really prompt a response.
Hmm.
So it's not just a time to say everything, you can't. Ideally, it's very short, hence the name. You get into an elevator, you pop up a few floors. How long is that going to take? 30, 60 seconds.
Yeah.
And imagine somebody turn to you and say, Sagar, what do you do?
Hmm.
And actually, we're asked this question all the time. And a lot of the time we go, well, I kind of, and it's very difficult sometimes, even if we've been in a job for a long time, to very succinctly say what we do, introduce ourselves or what we're promoting, and get that response and get people interested. So it is something you need to work on and craft.
And I imagine it's going to be very context dependent, right? So, like the classic, what do you do? Or tell us about yourself in an interview. I could go on and on about my experiences in some kind of, I don't know, while I was an intern at a farmer or whatever. And that's not going to be relevant. So, does it change every time? And the reason is because you said you need to practice it. So, do we need to practice for various scenarios, whatever could hit us? How much extempo? Sorry, I'm gonna have difficulty with with that word. Yeah,
Extemporaneous, I think, is the word you want to
extemporaneous,
say.
yes. So what's the component of that?
That's a good question. I think you always have to be aware of your audience and
Hmm,
adjust.
right,
But a lot of the time, I think people have some set pieces in a way, some
right.
set things that they need to be saying, what they do, what they're working on, a product or an idea. There are normally some set things and some key pieces about that
Hmm,
that you want to communicate. And you need to learn how to do that, learn how to do it verbally, not just written. The whole point is that it's verbal,
yeah.
and the way we speak is different to the way we write things. So those set things will not change necessarily,
Hmm,
but you always need to be looking at the person you're talking to and thinking, what part of this is going to interest my audience? And also, what response do I want from them?
hmm,
So I work for a lot of people who work for non-profits. Now, some of those are fundraisers.
yeah.
They've got donors in front of them. There's going to be a very specific ask. It's going to be about money, and those who are being asked know that. But they need to tailor what they're saying for that person.
Hmm,
Now, somebody else working in the non-profit might be a scholar and they've got an idea, they've got some research
right.
they really want to tell a congressman. A congressman is full of information, has info thrown at them morning, noon, and night, normally a lot of detail, normally a lot of detail overkill. And if you give them the gift of a 30 to 60-second, this is what I've got for you, and they can grasp it very quickly, then you're giving them a gift. It's a very different audience to a donor. And you want that congressman, or at least those folks around them, to say, send us some more information on that. We're interested. So,
Right.
so that's the adjustments you need to make to the various people you're talking to.
If we compare it to a movie or a film, or let's say even a book, how similar is it to a blurb by the publisher or a some kind of a trailer, or is it not that at all?
I think that's a good analogy, actually. I
Hmm.
think that's a good idea to compare those. So I see, with trailers like for Jaws, for
Hmm.
example, that
Hmm.
film, Spielberg's 1970s thriller. What would be the tagline for that? Oh, man-eating shark, dreadfully affecting summer beachgoers and this amazing group. You could probably put that in a couple of sentences, and then you get the idea very quickly.
Hmm.
It's similar. You want to know with an elevator pitch, and there are some components to it which we can go into. What problem are you solving with yourself or your research or your product?
Hmm.
What problem are you solving, and what do you want from me?
Is there a glimpse of a solution that one should, you know, come like basically say in an elevator pitch, or is it mostly about, hey, I can solve this problem very well for you, I understand it very well for you? Where's the emphasis at?
Good question. So I like to talk about an elevator pitch in terms of five components.
Hmm.
So when I'm teaching this, I'll say, let's break this apart so you can think about these five different components, really work on the content of those, and then put it back together.
Right.
You don't really want an elevator pitch that is, say it for a minute, a 50 seconds of problem.
Hmm. Okay.
that's that's just too much problem. You want to be part of the solution. So I break it down as problem. I get people to write this. I say, okay, get a pen. These are your bits. Problem, solution, benefits and value, unique, and call to action.
Okay.
So those are the pieces. Now, sounds simple. It's very hard to craft what goes in them. It's very hard to do it succinctly, but that's the kind of work that you want to be doing. So, can you get your problem and write as much as you like about your problem?
Hmm.
Throw everything at the wall if you're just thinking about this problem. Write everything down you can think of. How can you then say it? Maybe you need to start by writing it, but how do you get to say that in two or three sentences that I, as an audience, can grasp? And the audience is the whole point. So we really must really care for your audience by thinking, how can I make this really understandable and graspable
Hmm.
for my audience in these two or three sentences?
Right. Okay. So two or three sentences, that's useful. Can you come up with these components, subcomponents again, please?
Yeah. So, problem. So, you need to lay out the problem.
Right.
Otherwise, what are you solving?
Hmm.
Right? What's the problem? And I say to people, what geography are you
Yeah.
in terms of, is this about research? Is this about a product? Is this about an idea? Is this about something else?
Hmm.
Right? We've got to know very quickly what landscape we're in. So
Right.
make sure that's front loaded. So, and I will say just ahead of this doesn't have to be linear, and I'll talk about that in a little while, but it does need to be in there.
Right.
So, whatever the problem is, then what's the solution? Not just the solution, your solution. Is it your center?
Hmm.
Is it your nonprofit? Is it your research that's going to solve this? Is this a piece of legislation that needs to happen that's going to solve it?
Hmm.
Obviously, I live just outside DC, so we're very government focused in some of the nonprofits that we work with here. But we work with people all over the country, people who need to be able to say and give this elevator pitch at a moment's notice, being stopped. And what's the problem? But how are they solving it?
Right.
And again, put everything on the wall, try and get it down. And then what are the benefits and value? And what I like to say here is when this solution is happening, and sometimes people are in the beginning stages, they're making pitches to people who are going to support them, and they may not have a lot of results yet. Sometimes people are a fair way down and they've got results.
Hmm.
So I'm saying, well, put the legs on the theory. Tell me what's happened. Tell me about a life that's been changed. Tell me about a situation where something's turned around. That is showing me that your solution is working, and that is of interest to a donor or to a supporter.
Right.
So the benefits and the value are not only in theory, but also in practice. So stories are really valuable at
Mm.
that point. It could be your own story, but definitely some stories and results. Numbers are very helpful. One or two numbers, succinct, never fire hosed. And then we get to unique. And this is sometimes there isn't something specifically unique.
Mm.
Other people are doing it. Sometimes they're the only people who are doing it. I did work with a group, and one lady came back with her first draft of this elevator pitch. It was way too long. It was 2.5 minutes, and we were just all in a group sort of discussing it. And I said, "What's unique about your organization?" And she just put her head up and looked at me. She said, "Nobody else is doing this." I said, "They are. That's all you
Mm.
need to say on that. Nobody else is doing this." Right. It's a beautiful line, very simple. And an audience, again, grasp it really quickly. I understand, okay, oh, that's exciting to me. I might be able to contribute somewhere that's going to make a difference. Nobody else is right in this field. Now, if a donor or somebody who could possibly help is not interested,
Mm.
they also can make that decision. But at least it's very clear.
Right.
And then the last piece is call to action.
Mm.
Now, this is where people get all hot under the collar and start sweating. And, oh, I hate asking people for money, or I hate asking for specific things,
Mm.
or people just really don't know what the call to action is.
Yeah.
So, this is part of the work of breaking this apart to try and say, well, really have a think about what it is you are asking. Maybe the call to action is, can I give you my card and you get in touch? Or can I call you next week? Or can I email you and send you some more details? And if you've done the pitch well, they'll say, yeah, that's interesting to me. So just really knowing what it is you want from that
Mm.
audience and being quite clear. A lot of the time, communication isn't clear.
Mm.
So that's our job as coaches. I'm a public speaking coach at the Ewing School. All three of us are coaches. What we do in our work is we actually really are looking at the person in front of us, helping them, feeding back
Right.
a lot and saying, this isn't clear to me. I find that's a lot of the feedback that we give. Let's get it clear. What is it you mean? So I get people to spitball a bit, just chat, tell me a little bit. I'll be asking questions, and they come up with some nuggets of phrases,
Mm.
and I'll be writing them down. And I said, well, you said this, that was amazing. An audience is going to grasp that really quickly and understand. And then I feel like, oh, I'm excited or I'm intrigued. That's what you want from an audience with an elevator pitch.
Wow, okay. I have a lot of directions I can go in, but I think I do I want to start with public speaking and explore that tangent a little bit. So tell me what it is exactly. How much of it is let's say, an art versus a science, and how important is the art of rhetoric, which I don't think a lot of people study in school anymore. But like, what is it?
Well, I like the fact you mentioned the word art
Hmm.
and science, and
Right.
I do think it's both.
Okay.
Actually, it's definitely an art
Hmm.
and definitely got some science in it, some pieces in it. And so that's what we're working on as coaches. So my background is, you can hear I'm from London, England, and I live in the States, but I've been here a long time. But my background is I went to drama school,
Hmm.
and that those are my college years. And so I have a background in the arts
Hmm.
and a lot of stage work, voice work, some camera work. And what you do is you learn how to practice, you learn how to give feedback, you learn to really work and get things better.
Hmm.
So there's a huge art component in drama school. There's another side in drama school because people would automatically think, well, don't you just waft around going me, and walk around in leotards for 3 years? And that definitely does happen. But there's also another piece.
Hmm.
So you're doing a lot of work behind the scenes. If you're given a script, then I could give you a list of the work you do behind the scenes. You find out about the author.
Hmm.
You do some work on the time period the play was set in. You learn an accent. You do a biography of your character. How did I grow up? What sort of life have I had? So that when you walk onto the stage, as we are, we're all people. We turn up somewhere, we come with all our history, all the moods that we're in, all that's happening in our life. And it's exactly the same when you walk onto a stage. So there's the art piece, which is what you're doing in the rehearsal room, trying things out, taking risks, thinking about your voice. But there's also the craft and the work you do behind the scenes. And I found with public speaking training that those two pieces are the same,
Hmm.
slightly modified, but the same. So there's definitely a huge piece of practice and feedback. Nobody's going to get better if the first time they give their presentation, it's to their actual audience. They haven't practiced it, perhaps not even out loud. They've got no feedback on it, on how they're coming across or their material. But what we spend a lot of time doing when we're working with clients is talking about the audience. Who is this audience that you're talking to? Really delving into that and how you're going to connect with them. And also a lot of work on the messaging
Hmm.
and all the pieces that go into the messaging. For a start, what's the big idea of your talk?
Right.
Now, sometimes you throw that at someone and they'll say, I don't know. And that's absolutely fair. Sometimes we don't know. We haven't really voiced it yet, or what's at the heart of what I want to say. Again, it's like the elevator pitch. It's quite hard to pin down.
Hmm.
But if you don't know the big idea of your talk, how on earth is your audience going to get it? How is it? How are they going to walk out and say, wow, Sagar talked about X and be
Hmm.
able to sort of put it in a sentence? You've got to yourself have that in a sentence. So any sort of talk, from a 2 or 3 minute talk to a 10-minute talk to an hour's talk, you need to know what the big idea is.
Right.
So that's the big piece of the messaging. And then we want to make sure that you've got points to back it up. You also want to have components that are bringing it alive. If you're reading something, two-dimensional. You've got the words, you've got your interaction, and there is an author of that, but
Hmm.
the author's hidden. When you're speaking, three-dimensional.
Right.
We as an audience, we're looking at someone, we're taking somebody in, we're thinking about them. Everything that they're giving off, we're feeling off them. And there's the messaging piece. And then how are they connecting with us? So it's always message, delivery, audience, what you say, how you say it, who you say it to. So those are the three sort of pieces of the tripod that we're always working on. I'm always working on with public speaking.
Right.
And so it's an art, because get in the hot seat, get on the floor, let's see what's actually there, the reality of where your presentation is. But also we're going to pick it apart and really make you think about what's in it, what's the structure,
Hmm.
how are you going to open it, you're going to come out with a story, how are you going to end it, two of the hardest pieces, beginning and end. And so you've really broken it apart and done the work behind the scenes, and then you put those two together.
So, what are some, let's say, manifestations of public speaking? In the sense that, like, is a lecture a public speaking exercise, or is it just a talk, or which is like slightly salesy, or for that matter, like what Apple started with I don't know, sorry, Steve Jobs, and when he used to come
Yes,
up every year. So that probably is definitely public speaking. But if you go to a lecture, is that public speaking as well, or you are speaking to the public?
you are. I think every time you speak to anybody, you're
Yeah.
speaking in public.
Okay. Okay.
You're standing next to the coffee machine at work and you're having
Hmm.
a chat with someone, you're speaking in public. Now,
Right.
yeah, the stakes aren't super high.
Hmm.
You may just be chatting about your weekend,
Hmm.
but you're communicating. And I found that we think of those highly elevated moments, those presentations on the stage, the TED Talks, which seem to be I really want to do a TED Talk. People say, it's got that high elevated status
Hmm.
of, wow, I would really have to work hard to do one of those. But I found that most people in their jobs have to speak in public, whether that's to their team, whether that's to their manager, whether that's an all staff. And even Warren Buffett, when asked about, what could I be doing to get really good at my job and really grow in the ranks of my role,
Hmm.
he said, get very good at public speaking. He said, whether you like it or not.
Hmm.
He said, that's an asset that's going to last you 50 years, or this is my favorite bit, a liability that's going to last you 50 years. He said, it's a necessary skill.
Right.
And so actually, I think it's really important for all of your work. Yes, there are more highly elevated places that you may need it. And I wouldn't suggest going from doing no public speaking to that level. I would find lots of ways to grow and develop and take that risk, feel that fear, because most people are pretty scared to stand up in any situation to speak. And that's not a bad thing.
Hmm. Right. 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 Okay. Fundamentally, though, when you are speaking to a, let's say, one member or just any audience, any ex-audience, what we are trying to do, the speaker is trying to do is convince them that, a buy-in, like their way of thinking or whatever they have done. It's always a buy-in, either to a particular product or a service or even an idea or themselves, if they are interviewing for a job. Is this a correct way to put it?
Yes, it does sound salesy,
It is, yeah, but
right?
like, is it not?
It is, but I would say there's a deeper there's a deeper point to it,
Hmm. Right, right, right.
which is to connect authentically.
Yeah.
So we're all very clever people. I work
Hmm.
with some very clever people,
Hmm.
and we've got very good at sniffing out
Yeah.
if somebody is trying to sell us something.
Right.
So we all know we've got on those calls and we know, hello, this is, and you don't know them. And you said, I don't want to buy. And they said, oh, it's not a sales call. And I think, yeah, it is. It is. But we're very good at sniffing it out and we don't like it.
Yeah.
So yes, our motivation might be, I really want them to come and understand what I'm telling them, or to come on site, or whatever it is, whatever our motivation is. But I think there's a deeper objective, which is about caring for your audience, which is connecting with them and really thinking, how does my message matter to them?
Hmm.
So often in introductions, I hear a lot of introductions. I've heard hundreds of practices of talks, and people come out and say their name and what they're going to talk about that day and then launch in. And
Hmm.
I say, wait, why does what you're going to tell me matter to me as an audience? Because if I don't care, then stop, don't bother.
Right.
Make me care, make it matter in a genuine way to me as an audience. So I really like to think about my audience and really muse on them and think, how can I really be caring for them, looking at them, making them feel that I've thought about them? Then they'll listen to you.
Right.
You stand a
Right.
much greater chance of connecting and them listening genuinely. Now, and if they're genuinely interested, you've got them. Some people won't be.
Yeah.
Normal.
Yeah. And that's okay. I mean, is there a, okay. Now, you said musing about your audience. Can you maybe give us some more tidbits as to how do we muse about our audience? Or is it just like basic demographics and psychographics that people come to? I just feel those things are very shallow. There's certain,
Yeah.
yeah. So how do you muse on them?
Well, I think some people, certainly marketeers,
Right.
dive right in and get down to who's one person in this demographic. I'm not really talking about that. I'm just really talking about a general sense
Hmm.
of who are the people sitting in front of me. Is this a bunch of students?
Right.
There are a bunch of students. I need to think about some of my word choices, right? What's going on campus right now? What's in the conscious mind of the country? What's
Hmm.
happening in the country right now? What time of year is it? Right? Are they getting ready to graduate? Is it 4 p.m. in the afternoon and everyone's tired and can't wait to go for for supper? So I'm thinking about the time of day, I'm thinking about where they're at, and I'm really thinking, what's the nugget I've got for them
Mm, mm,
that's going to help them in their lives? This is if it was a student audience. And with public speaking, and I have done this with MA students, and I said, this is a lifelong skill. Wherever you go, you're going to need to be able to speak in public. Some of you are going to hate it, some of you are going to love it,
mm.
but it's a skill. So I want you to think this is a skill I'm going to need throughout my whole life. Find opportunities to work on. So already I've begun to make it valuable, hopefully, for them. Say, this you need. It's not I need it.
Right.
You need it. So that's really some of the thoughts that I think about the audience and wanting them to feel I'm looking at them.
Right. Right. So just for clarification, though, excuse me, a lecture series, a lecture, like old school, you see in like Sherlock Holmes movies or whatever, right? Moriarty, a bad example or whatever. He was a good public speaker, though. Is is that public speaking? Because you are really delving deep into a particular topic, and you're not giving one nugget of wisdom, you're giving plenty. So
Yeah.
that kind of that might violate your one of your rules.
Well, with a lecture, are you talking about a college
Yeah,
professor?
yeah. Or a public lecture.
So, yeah, or a public lecture. Well, I would say college professors have a unique place because, and I don't want to get somebody going, you're wrong, and I could be wrong, but I do think college professors have a, a captive audience
Mm, hmm.
and no incentive to be great speakers.
Oh, yeah, that's a problem. That is a problem. Yes, I've certainly had that.
Yeah, so yeah, and I think a lot of people have that. Now, I've got two children in college at the moment. They come back sometimes and say, "This professor was awesome. They're funny. They're this. They've done this," and I'm like, "That is wonderful." The college professor is finding ways, despite the incentive, just finding ways to really love and care for their audience. Everything I've just said.
Yeah,
Now, I think if it's just a public lecture, yeah, they can be wonderfully boring, but people will sit there because they want the information. They also have an opportunity to be wonderfully good,
yeah, yeah.
right? Give the information. How, if I was working with someone doing something like that, I would say anything you can pare down. What's the big idea of the whole series? What are the 3, 4, 5 points you really want to make? Bring this alive for me. What stories have you got?
Right,
Don't just give me numbers, give me stories. Bring it down to one person that I can resonate with. The whole point with everything, lecture, public speaking, talk, is your audience.
right, right. Why is the story component so important? Is it something deeply within the human psyche that craves it? Otherwise, they don't get abstract things.
That's a good explanation.
Okay.
Uh,
Okay.
yeah, I think that's pretty good. I think we're human beings.
Right.
We connect with other human beings.
Hmm.
We have our own stories, and you have your story. So when you tell a personal story, because we've lived it,
Hmm.
we probably don't know we're doing this. I know this because I went to drama school. You're seeing it in your mind's eye.
Hmm. Hmm.
You
Hmm.
see the people, you see the situation, you remember how you felt. So when I'm asking people to tell a story, those are the kinds of things I'm trying to get out of them. Sometimes people really tell it on a sort of a summary level,
Right.
where they're basically a bit like a book.
Hmm.
They tell you about the mountains and the ski resort and the snow and the cold, but they don't really talk about the sensory details.
Hmm.
And it's the sensory details that an audience will remember because suddenly we'll feel it. Well, I was so frozen that
Hmm.
my lips had turned blue and I could hardly, and my hands were shaking. I could hardly, once you start getting into the momentary sensory details and the feelings you had, then it breaks the story open. And because we've all felt those feelings in our own capacity, we will remember a story much more than a whole talk. I've heard hundreds of talks, and it's the stories that I remember. And remember, the story needs to not just be a story unless you're telling a story around the fire with your friends and it's fun,
Hmm.
but a story within a public speaking uh, presentation where the story needs to have a message in it. So if you've got a point you're trying to make and you're working on your material and you're thinking, wow, that great story really highlights that. So would you like me to give you an example?
Yeah.
So when I'm talking about public speaking and we're working in the practice session, so a lot of practice goes in, a lot of feedback goes in. So I'll say to people sometimes, okay, so it's a little small at the moment.
Mm.
It's not reading brilliantly to me. This is why feedback's so useful because we think we're doing
Yeah.
10 out of 10 on energy. And I'll say, well, it looks a bit of a 6 to me. So we need you to go a bit bigger.
Mm.
So, I'm asking people to take risks, to really sort of push slightly uncomfortable, not crazy, and within the safety of that a client and clientee work and coach and client safety space, and saying, really go for it. So I learned this early on. So when I was at drama school, I was in the second year. I was the youngest one there, and I was 19, and I got given this lead role in a musical, and the character in this musical was wild.
Mm.
She was bigger than any character, physically, emotionally, volume wise, than I'd ever played before. And I was working through the script and standing up, and there's the rest of the cast and the director, and working and trying, and I wasn't really getting it.
Mm.
And I knew it. The director knew it. The cast, my friends knew it. It wasn't really working. And then one day I got into rehearsal and something in me sort of snapped, if you like. And I just thought, oh, stuff it. Just go wild. Just
Yeah.
give it a go.
Mm.
What can go wrong? Right. Just go so over the top.
Mm.
What does it feel like? Don't know. Let's try it. So the music started because that it was to a song, and she came out. This was the beginning. She came out and she was singing and going wild on the stage. The music started, and I thought, go for it. So I came on, went wild, and just experimented.
Right.
And it was uncomfortable and risky, and kind of felt great as well. Music stopped, and I thought, how's that? So I look at the director, and she's like, and I look at the cast members, and they're like,
Right.
and she just looked at me. She said, do it again.
Mm.
So you don't forget what it feels like. And so in that moment, I learned about risk.
Mm-hmm.
I learned that, what does it feel like to do that? And I sort of freed myself, and I grew in that. And it taught me I've got to push. I've got to push. So I've forgotten a lot about that until I started communications training, and I could
Right.
see people were being very safe. And I'm careful when I use that, but it's like we need some more. And it also taught me what I feel I'm doing and how it's reading to the audience can be two different things.
Yeah.
So that's where feedback really comes in, and I can feedback to what I'm seeing.
And even like what kind of audience? So I wouldn't say that like stereotyping is necessary, but if you are, I mean, it kind of sometimes is useful because if you are trying to like figure out I need to give this talk in like various locations and various cultures, you might want to
Mm.
like, fine tune a few things when it comes to gregariousness or things like that. To your point about safe, is it because if you come across as that you're playing too safe, that there is a sense that the audience are not going to really buy into your ideas or your charm because you are not, let's put it this way, you're not really laying all your cards on the table and they feel something's off. Is that the theory behind it? If you've ever thought about it.
I've thought about it.
All right.
Yeah, I think I like that. Your cards not quite on the table.
Yeah.
There is something about public speaking which is to do with vulnerability.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
when you stand up to speak,
Right.
people feel vulnerable, and rightly so.
Hmm.
You're you're on the line.
Hmm.
People are looking at you. People are not just hearing what you're saying, they're really taking you in. So we try and manage that through all sorts of means, through hiding behind the podium, through, you know, making sure I've got all my notes or I'm reading because I'm just to get through it. But the audience
Yeah.
are not getting fully you. So one of the great things about improving your public speaking is getting more comfortable to bring your personality and authentic you to the stage. The more you share yourself
Hmm.
with your audience, the more they can really feel like they know you a little bit more.
Yeah.
And that's wonderful for them. And it's great for you. And you begin to enjoy being on stage, but you have to get over that. I can't hide.
Hmm.
I can't hide. And we do it in all sorts of ways.
Right.
Not just, we definitely see it in the body language, definitely see it hiding behind the podium, but also, you know, presentation can feel small. You
Yeah.
use the word feel when you're asking the question, and it is a feel, it's an intangible.
Hmm.
So when we're looking at delivery components, how we're delivering, and that's us. We're on the line. We're the one delivering. They're not just reading, but we're it.
Hmm.
You're thinking vocally, what's happening verbally, right? Then that's the diction, that's the just the mechanics of your mouth working and learning how to do that. There's melody, there's making sure that you're not speaking too quickly. That's one of the biggest notes I give. So there's all the verbal pieces that go in. There's the body language. And we give ourselves, there's the things we give ourselves away. There are things we want to be doing. There are things that show that we're nervous.
Right.
Lots of closed sort of arms. I see that a lot. Really sort of out. I don't know if you can see in the camera, but elbows sort of stuck there because that actually feels quite vulnerable to
Right.
actually open your arms like that. So just the open body language, you're communicating, and then there's that feel piece. It's an intangible. Is the person shy?
Yeah.
We feel it off people. Sometimes people get up to speak and I go, oh, I know that they're shy. I
Hmm.
don't want to overtly say it because it's difficult for people, but I feel that. And when I have a chat with people and they say, I'm really quite shy, and I say, well, you have to ask yourself a question first before we can start working on all these other pieces, which is, will you allow yourself to be seen?
Hmm.
Will you allow yourself to stand and be seen by your audience? And if you can begin to say yes, then your public speaking can grow.
So it's basically like giving yourself permission, in that aspect at least.
Yes, that's a nice
Hmm.
way of putting it.
Hmm. So do you think like these characteristics like shy, or whatever else is like really deeply ingrained, and you'd need to go through a lot of exposure therapy to, to blunt it, or is it tangible? Sorry, plastic, malleable.
uh, I think some people are shy and some people are not.
Okay.
But if somebody said, I am shy,
Hmm.
but I'm going to get out there anyway,
Right.
and there's a quality about that person, which also is not just massive energy coming towards people, it can be an openness, but something that draws an audience the other way, draws us in.
Right.
So I remember an actor coming to speak to us at drama school, and it was late afternoon, so he was obviously going off to the West End. So he was really looking after his voice. It
Hmm.
was Judi Dench's husband, actually, Michael Williams, and he was really looking after his voice and talking very quietly.
Right.
But he had so much gold to
Hmm.
tell us. I remember after 45 minutes, I looked around at everybody, and we'd all started like this, and all of us had our elbows on our knees, and all of us were leaning in. It was really fascinating. So somebody that said, I'm going to share myself with my audience, I may be a quieter person. That's fine.
Hmm.
That's fine. That draws an audience in a different way. As long as you've said, I've got over that hump, and I'm going to really care about my audience and tell stories. I've worked on my material, and I don't mind being looked at.
Right. 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 Okay. So can you make a case for monotones and the deadpan way of delivery at all? Because, I obviously thought that it's not going to fly, but I follow Lex Friedman. he is totally monotonic. I mean, if you put him in that category, but it's fascinating sometimes because I'm just listening. So is there any is that you using your personality to just building a separate kind of connection with just you and not just following all the rules? Like, let me just phrase it another way. Let's say there is an archetype of what somebody who is engaged in public speaking should do. Now you strive for it, but then you also strive to sort of like reintegrate into your core personality so that a unique you comes out. Is that a good way to approach it? Otherwise, you'll just become like replicas of each other.
The goal is to be 100% you.
Okay. Okay.
That's the goal. Now, sometimes people, I think when we're working on a voice and we are talking about those, we want vocal variety
Hmm. Hmm.
generally because that keeps an audience listening. If you hear a very monotone voice with no energy and
Yeah.
it's really flat, and they use the same pace throughout, and they use about one or two notes, that was 10 seconds and it was boring. So you're not going to listen for a long period of time. Now, some people, that's their kind of cachet,
Hmm.
but it's built into the persona, hopefully not just a persona, it's built into who they are. And they make their whole persona that.
Yeah. I'm thinking Noam Chomsky.
I don't know. I haven't listened.
Yeah.
So if they may be very droll and
Hmm.
maybe hilarious, and it works.
Yeah.
The thing is, you have to see if it works. A lot of
Right.
people, boring voice does not work.
Hmm.
So it's a bit like a spider's web with the voice stuff. If you touch one bit of the spider's web, it affects somewhere down here. So if you talk about melody and pace and volume and tone and pitch and pausing, you touch any of these, you throw energy in, it affects everything. It should lift everything.
Hmm.
Uh, all those pieces should work together. If we weren't watching you, if we were just listening to a podcast, then how is your voice? Is
Hmm.
it interesting? Will I listen
Yeah.
for a good period of time? And there's a number of reasons that helps us to continue listening. So I was part of a production team where I used to work, and I asked the producers of podcasts because they could see the data analytics of podcasts. And mostly their podcasts were not like ours, which is video as well as audio. It was just audio.
Right.
And they could see the analytics of where people were dropping off. And they said basically in 45 minutes to an hour's podcast, after about 10 minutes, people will drop off. If they go beyond that, they're likely to listen to the whole thing.
Hmm.
So you've got 10 minutes to really, and that's generous, I think, to really get people, if we're not watching you, we're just listening, to make you like you, make them think, oh, they've got something really interesting to say in terms of the content. I want to listen to more. Their voice is interesting, so it's got variety and it slows down.
Hmm.
And there's different tone. It's got more, but not false.
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
It's them, but they've sort of worked on it and they're upping their energy without going too fast. There are some skills involved there. If you've got that going on, you're more likely, not a guarantee, more likely to keep your audience listening because we don't have this. And this is the face is so interesting to look at along with a voice.
Yeah.
Once you take this away, we've just got these two voices happening. You want to try and make it interesting.
Yeah, this is something to that because I listen to a lot of podcasts and most of the time I'm just doing chores or like driving,
Yeah.
and it depends. When I'm driving, I can only listen to the regular speed, but if I'm doing chores and all, I have to listen to 2x because it's just otherwise it's too slow. Unless there's a
Ah.
lot of information coming in, but I always do it on YouTube because I need to know that there is a video component available. If there's something interesting, I'm going to go back and see how the faces and all look. So even though I'm not looking at the video, I need the video to be there, which is weird. Like, I don't know why it's there, but so yeah.
Well, the face is giving away a lot of the intent of
Hmm,
what you're saying.
hmm,
Now, very good voice actors don't need the face. The intent is in the voice.
yeah,
That's why they get paid the big bucks to
right.
do those voiceovers. because they have the skill to be able to get everything they need to just in the voice,
Right. Right.
not just the words, but the intent as well, the humor, the sarcasm,
Hmm.
the all the different tones that need to be in there. So it is interesting. You're going back and watching the face of what they, what was going on as well, not
Yeah.
just the actuals. So that's interesting. But that is a real skill to be able to do very well.
Right. So you used a few terms that I'm wondering if we can like spend 1 or 2 minutes on each. So melody, pitch, what else did you say? Um,
So pacing,
pace.
speed, definitely. That's one of the first ones. I'll start there in a second. Melody,
Hmm.
volume, I would say tone,
Hmm.
and diction. Diction is a slightly different piece. That's the technicality
Hmm.
of using your mouth and the various places that we make the sound. Certainly in English, we've got the lips, we've got the tongue behind the teeth, we've got the throat. Those are what we call plosives. You're making explosions,
Hmm.
and that's where you're creating those voiced and devoiced consonants. And then there's that opening the back of your throat to create all the vowel sounds. So I've done a lot of singing in my life, so I know about vocal warm-ups for singing and for speaking. They're very similar, more scales than arpeggios when you're doing singing warm-up.
Hmm.
But the actual mechanics is the same. Really holding, getting all the power from your breathing,
Hmm.
which is diaphragm, making sure the throat is open. So making sure all that's stretched open. You're using the back of your throat and the back of your nose as well. And
Right.
then there's just the mechanics of using that. And people are sometimes mumbling, so you have to really get them. So there's that diction piece, which is the mechanics.
Hmm.
And then you've got actually how you're using your voice. So speed or pacing is one of the biggest notes I give to people. Most people speak too quickly.
Yeah.
And I said it really slowly.
Yeah. Yeah. Guilty.
Most people, yeah, most people speak way too quickly. Sometimes I've heard, and I love this phrase, I call it the runaway train. People take a breath at the beginning and they go, just keep going until they get to the end because they're so nervous.
Yeah.
It does take a
Aboard.
bit yeah, well, that's true. It does take quite a bit of confidence
Yeah.
to take your time.
Yeah.
And what does it feel like to go half speed? Most people, when we're practicing it, when we're isolating that in a practice, I'll say it's very hard to say slow down.
Hmm.
People will do, people will slow down maybe for 10, 15 seconds and then go back to their tempo.
Yeah.
Everyone's got a different tempo. So what I try to say to people to get people to slow down a little bit, what does it feel like, to get them used to slowing down and taking their time, is thinking about projecting. Imagine you're in a slightly bigger room, you want to hit the back of the wall. The upside of that is that it affects the diction,
Yeah.
which is good. So
Hmm.
it's a win-win in that respect. So pace is huge. Most people speak too quickly. I'm guilty of it myself as a Brit. I have to, and I know I shouldn't be doing it. I have to deliberately try and slow down, take
Hmm.
some breaths. So that's speed. Melody. Melody is really exactly talking about the different notes that you're using. And when I talked about that monotone voice, sometimes there's just one or two notes. I mean, I'm using one or two notes. If I was to go to a keyboard, I could bash those out for you there. Now, what you want, ideally, without being somebody else, is to find different notes within your own voice.
Hmm.
And that's natural. If I ask somebody to tell a story of something that happened to them without knowing it, they'll use, oh my goodness, right? They went up there and then they said, this person said this to me, and I just wept.
Hmm.
The note goes right down. So you're getting this variety and it adds interest. That's
Yeah.
what so different notes. It's a bit like a song. A
Yeah.
song has a melody, has lots of different notes. That's what makes it interesting. Same with the speaking voice.
Sorry, quick question on notes.
Yeah.
How many notes are there? It's very basic, but like, do you know how many notes are there? Like, what's the range?
Okay, so a normal octave, if for those of you who know a piano, say we go from middle C
Hmm.
I think Americans call it C4 to C5. So middle C to the next C, you've got 12 notes.
Hmm.
That's 7 white notes and 5 black notes.
Okay. Okay.
And so that's on a musical level, and they
Right.
go up in half step. And so that's 12 different notes. Now, singers can have octave ranges, three, 4 octave ranges, but a speaking voice is not going to have that.
Hmm.
But you just want to find variety and practice it. So sometimes I would say to somebody, okay, we'll start at a note, doesn't matter, wherever your pitch is. And pitch, I try not to mess with
Hmm.
because that's where, our speaking voice is so connected to our background.
Hmm. 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 Hmm.
Certain American accents have more nasal quality to them.
Right.
Certain accents, French, for example, you've got their sound, so that to the throat. So they've got different. So I try not to mess with pitch unless people are doing long-term work on their voice.
Right.
But people maybe have a more high-pitched voice. You know what I mean? They've got or a lower voice. So wherever the pitch is fine. But I'll say, then try and walk up some stairs as if you're going up to the top, and
Yeah.
then come down and just think, how far can you go?
Right.
It's
Right.
just a
So,
little exercise.
and now, and I'm assuming that every note here, because you said like I wept, and that there was like a drop over there. So
Yeah.
it's kind of conveying what you're feeling, and then it just is a very high fidelity information to the audience as well that they should be feeling that. Is that, I mean, would a note correspond to an emotion?
It could do, and that could line up with tone.
Okay.
So our
Okay.
tone, the way we do it naturally,
Hmm.
when people get up to speak, some of that just goes out the window, certainly if they're reading.
Right.
That's
Right.
why when you hear people read, it's really dull. That's a couple of reasons for that. One, people write it the way they write it, not how they speak. So that's a big lesson there.
Yeah.
But also they produce this monotone voice, and it's not how they speak. So tone is what we mean.
Hmm.
So we could be telling a story about something really heartfelt.
Hmm.
But so my tone is going to be, I'm going to adjust my pace. I'm going to be a bit slower, use some lower notes, and try and get warmth and breathiness in. Trying to do it now.
Hmm. Hmm.
And then if you're more angry about something, you're going to use a slightly harsher tone. You may go up. You're hitting harder sounds.
Hmm.
And that's because that's what we do.
Yeah. Yeah. Especially, so you just hit those sounds now, and I'm imagining like a very pointed hammer and trying to like have a go at like some kind of a brick. So that's how it sounds like. So there is a certain brashness to it, but it's not like
Yes.
even those things can be adjusted. Interesting. Okay. Okay. Sorry. So
But
yeah, yeah,
but as long as they're authentic,
yeah.
as
Okay.
long as they're coming from you,
Right.
and you've learned to be a little bit bigger and finding your voice and freedom and telling stories, and when we tell stories, we often say how people spoke to us.
Yes.
So finding those voices. So I worked with somebody just over the Christmas break, and he was doing "'Twas the Night Before Christmas," which is this long, lovely poem. It's got an orchestra behind him. He had to time it with the orchestra. It was wonderful.
Hmm.
So he had to play parts of it. He's being Father Christmas.
Hmm. Hmm.
And right at the end, Father Christmas is going off in his sleigh, and he said, okay, so and a Merry Christmas to all. And I said, make sure the voice goes up if you say a Merry Christmas to all. It's just completely flat. It
Yeah.
falls dead. You want the melody to be going up, but to enjoy that being that character. So
Yeah.
that was a lot of fun to work on something like that. But yes, sometimes, and I'm never normally that prescriptive, but on a poem of that nature, I said we want that melody to go up.
Yeah, the second example you gave is like Father Christmas had it. He was gonna retire. Like, no more Merry Christmas. I'm not doing this anymore.
Merry
Like,
Christmas for all. That's it. Yeah, I'm going home. I'm having a sherry. I'm
yeah,
not delivering the presents.
yeah. Sorry, so I interrupted you. You was talking about melody and then pitch. You briefly mentioned anything else that you missed in that?
Yes. So we've got so pace. I'm trying volume.
Right.
And volume, yeah, we want to come down sometimes. And again, all of the remember the spider's web
Hmm.
image.
Hmm.
all of these pieces are connected. So sometimes we want to just come down. That helps the audience to come in
Right.
as well. And I would also just add pausing.
Hmm.
Pausing is very effective. Most people think, I've got to count 1, 2. And when you're practicing it, maybe you do.
Hmm.
So we recently did a workshop where we asked people to walk onto the stage and wait 5 seconds. And that goes to that piece of being looked at.
Right.
So people walked on, and I had a timer. And afterwards, I said to the person, I said, "Oh, do you think you waited?" And they said, "Oh, it was an eternity. It was at least 5 seconds." And I said, "It wasn't even two."
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
It feels like a long time. But pausing is absolutely essential, and they're not dead moments.
Right.
You could finish a quote, you could finish a really important point and just hold it
Hmm.
and look at your audience and let the audience take a breath. And I often say, take some pauses between what I call sections. You've told us about this really important point. Take a breath. Let your audience take a breath.
Hmm.
I mean, physically as well as just, wow, I'm still thinking about that. That's important. Okay. And then you start on a new tone. So now I'm
Hmm.
going to tell you about, you know what I mean? It's a different feel, different tone, different energy, but take some pauses. We need it. Most people don't pause. I did an exercise with a client recently. She's often jumping in very, very quickly. She's got high energy, jumps in very quickly. And I said, okay, just an exercise. I'm going to ask you a ton of silly questions. Doesn't matter what the answer is. You've got to wait 2 seconds before
Hmm.
you answer. And she said, well, where do I look? I said, I don't care. What should I do? I said, think about your answer, but don't actually answer yet. Because we were trying to stop the fillers
Yeah.
and the qualifiers. Because often we're thinking, I don't know how to answer. And we go, well, good question, I think. We fill it
Yeah.
as opposed to taking those 2 seconds. And she loved it. It was a really good exercise.
Why do you think that is though? Like, why are we so afraid of the of just pausing for 2, 3 seconds? I mean, I'm definitely guilty of that. I was coached and I don't know, ridiculed or whatever, but
Oh,
it's just, why do we do it?
I think we want to appear credible.
So
And
not pausing will make us appear credible.
well, we just want to jump in
Right.
but at the same time, we're sort of scrambling sometimes.
Right.
Unless we practice a lot of our answers
Hmm.
out loud, which is important, so we know sort of the phrases that we're going to use, as well as adapting for the moment and the person that you're talking to. So having the confidence to take 1 or 2 seconds feels like a long time.
Right.
It
Right.
isn't.
Right. It might be a power thing as well, though, like, or maybe like a class thing, which and the kind of way you were raised, because it's just if you're always answering to somebody else, you are also thinking about their emotional states, and they probably are not thinking as much about yours. So you want to be like up here, yes, yes, I'm helpful, I can do this.
Yes.
That could be a thing. Interesting. Okay. All right. So we are the last segment of the podcast, and I have still a lot of questions, so I'm gonna go for some rapid fire.
Oh,
Um, what I was asking is like, what's your opinion on scripted versus unscripted? Like, where do you personally would coach your clients to go to?
I think if somebody's really afraid
Right.
and it's the beginning, writing out does help. And let's write it the way you speak
Okay.
and get you to be reading, but also coming off book, coming off page. If it's just a case of just get on, you've got to do it. This is really going to be a safety valve for you.
Hmm.
You've
Hmm.
got it there.
Hmm.
Now, if you are more experienced, I would push you to go to bullets because then you've got the spine underneath you. You can drop your eyes down to keep you in place,
Hmm.
stop you going down a rabbit hole. But your audience really matters. You can engage with your audience. You
Right.
can look at them. You can have fun. You can take in what's happening, start to read, as well as got your spine underneath you.
Hmm. Okay. But how important is it that the speaker does not, like, I don't know, like, I'm just gonna give my example. if I am trying to look at a bullet, it almost feels like I'm using like chits on an exam. Now, is it okay to just look? Is it like an open book exam? Or I'll have to like sort of have weird ways to just glance at it and then just, go about having, giving the speech again.
It's not a test.
Okay.
It's not a test. I
Hmm.
mean, in some ways, it doesn't really matter how you get yourself to the position where you're comfortable on stage
Hmm.
and your audience gets what you're saying.
Right.
Now, it's very rare for someone to memorize a talk. I've
Right.
only ever seen it once. Most people have some kind of bullets or a little bit of reading or a little bit of both. And it's very rare for, well, people do off the cuff, get up and tell us about, and that's nerve wracking, but that's not normally the situation with presentations.
Right.
So you've got to find the best way. It's not a test.
Hmm.
You do whatever you need to do to make it look seamless for your audience.
Right.
If you
Right.
need bullets, nothing wrong. And that can be part of a pause, remember.
Right.
You can maybe be to the side of a podium and you walk around the podium, have a quick look at your notes, make it look seamless.
Yeah.
That's part of the craft.
Right.
Not cheating.
Okay. And if you want to convey a very dense idea or a lengthy idea, then
Yeah.
a talk's not going to cut it, right? So that talk's going to be another. So there's an elevator pitch within the talk, and then the talk itself is an elevator pitch for something deeper, like a monograph or a book. So what's the limitation? And like, first of all, how long can a talk last for? Like in your, like, what's the best best thing that you can come up with? 20 minutes of an hour more?
You can talk for as long as you've been asked to talk for.
Oh, okay, okay.
Yeah.
So there's no
I mean,
like
some
losing.
people
Yeah.
some people are given an hour and they say probably talk for about 40, 45 minutes, which is long.
Right.
Actually, it is quite a long time. And then Q&A for 15 minutes. I've heard that for a very long time. It can be shorter.
Hmm.
If you're interesting and you've done the hard graft on your work, you've got some interesting visuals to keep it interesting for your audience.
Right.
If you've got great stories, if you've got some fabulous points, if there's some interaction, you can make that a wonderful talk for 45 minutes.
Hmm. Okay. Okay. Interesting. But you're not gonna like, filibuster your way to like 24 hours talking. I mean, there has to be some kind of a limit, which will
Yeah,
keep the other.
sure.
Right. Okay.
Nobody would want to hear anyone speak for 24 hours.
Well, it depends.
Yes, that's true. There's normally some kind of parameters put around your invitation.
Right. Right. Okay. Elocution classes, accent classes, and then diction. Is there any kind of a real difference over here when it comes to these particular things, or is it just yeah? What is it like? What's an elocution class that was a thing back in the day?
Back in the day, yes,
Yeah.
I had elocution lessons in my junior school back in London. I remember, and it's basic speaking skills, but it
Right.
is definitely the mechanics of the mouth.
Right. Right. Right.
So you really are working on diction. You really are working on creating sounds
Hmm.
and being understandable. A lot of people, I would say for the most part, certainly without any training, most people aren't really using their mouths enough,
Hmm.
maybe 50% at most. So there's a lot of work. This is why actors work on their voice and singers work on their voice because this is their instrument. It's the tool of your trade
Hmm.
when you're speaking. And so you really need to be able to know what you're doing, why you're doing certain exercises, and really work on those tongue twisters so you can speak clearly. Now, an accent class, of course, is going to be different
Hmm.
because you're learning an accent. And with accents, the vowel sounds change. Certainly within English, it'll be the vowel sounds, not so much the consonants.
Hmm.
If you're doing, well, an accent is, yeah. I mean, if you were learning a different language, you might produce the sounds in a different place. But so an accent class, you do have to really, and there are phonetics with that. You learn the A's and the O's, and there are just different sounds and different melodies. So,
Right.
for example, you've got different melodies happening. So, with Australian, a lot of what they say, it sort of goes up at the end. So,
Yes.
everything sounds a little bit like a question
Yes.
because the melody goes up.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I guess when you said melody, I was thinking Liverpool. I mean, that definitely is melodious.
It
So,
is melodious.
Yes. Okay. Well, I mean, I guess we're at the end. Do you have any parting thoughts?
Uh, well, just public speaking in general, it's a wonderful skill. I've
Hmm.
seen people really grow, not just in the skill of public speaking, but really grow in their own confidence and abilities. So it really feeds into that,
Right.
which is a wonderful thing as a coach to watch myself and my fellow coaches at the uni school. We always say this. It's really wonderful see people just growing themselves as well as the skill
Yeah.
of public speaking. And it is, as Warren Buffett said, a necessary skill for working life. So I will always say to people, great, let's do some work right now, but have the long term view of the value of good public speaking and the impact that you can have because of it.
And how do people work with you?
Oh, they can get in touch with us at the Ewing School. That's ewing.school.com,
Right.
and you'll be able to find us there.
Perfect. Well, thank you very much for coming on, Kim. Just hang around for 5 more minutes after I stop the recording.
Thank you.
Thank you.